I mean, this question gets asked a lot, and I think it's the right question, but it's almost cliched at this point. But what's the thought? Like, so you said there's an underbelly. Is the thought that there's good, just to simplify it to an extent, there's good and evil in people and in the world,
Cool.
and there's a portion of the population in America, but obviously it exists everywhere in the world, that are just, is it just that it's evil? It's just, as you said, they're filled with hate. If you try and empathize with that side, and I get that that phrase can be triggering and can sound like empathize with that side, like what the hell are we talking? And that goes both ways, right? People react to that, but I think it's valuable. It's in many ways the reason I do the show is to talk to people and to understand from all different perspectives. Because I think regardless of what we believe, we have to try and understand it. I think to make sense of it. If you try and empathize with it, is there anything to it? Is there anything that it's okay? I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but here's how I think it happened. Here's how I think good people maybe stumbled into the wrong way of thinking, or maybe there's something in their thinking that you don't see. Like, is it as simple as just good and evil, or is it more complex than that? I guess is the simple question.
Well, that's a better question to ask your previous guest, because she's much smarter than me. But I think there's an element of fear. Whoever they are, those guys, are challenging the status quo and my right to be the dominant citizen in America. White Anglo-Saxons, white Christians, like to say they founded the country and they're the dominant force behind the promise of America. Again, as a Jewish person, I don't wear it on my skin, but as a Jewish person, I'm somewhat offended by that. I don't think anybody ought to be considered, quote, the majority. We're all in this together, and I think that's how it should be. So I think there's a fear that, well, again, if you look at some of the accusations leveled at Jewish people, we put a greater value on education. We like money, they say. Now I know I'm one of them. I know a lot of poor Jewish people. I wouldn't call myself poor, but I'm certainly not the wealthiest guy in the room. Do we put a value on success? Yeah. Shouldn't everybody? Do you want to be a poor person? But you can have empathy for a poor person. And if a poor person's Black and he's looking for a job and you're competing for the same job and you don't get it, is it because he got a handout or because he was qualified for it? The thinking tends to be some kind of racial preference. He got it even though he's not qualified. These things are nonsense. He got into school and he took my place in school. My attitude is we ought to all want the same things and value the same things and want to lift each other as fellow citizens. Now, maybe I sound altruistic. I don't know, but
well, you probably do. But I don't know that that's a bad thing. And I mean that genuinely. Like, it gets back to the question before, the quote you said, because let's stick with that. Can we all get along? Can we, right? There's a philosophical question there. And let me probe on what you were saying, that point about we should all want to be successful. Some people would argue, and maybe I might even agree, that seems like a benign statement. That seems like, yeah, of course, we should all want to do well and be successful. But at the root of that is that maybe the answer to the question of, if we're all trying to be successful, if we're all trying to move towards something and get somewhere, whether we want to admit it or not, it creates this degree of competitiveness. It creates this degree of, well, I need to get above this person because it puts a value to it that we're trying to get more or better or more successful. Okay. And inherently in that means it is very hard, if not impossible, for us to all get along because we can't strive for things and care for each other. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but maybe. What do you think about that? Is there something in that?
maybe, but it doesn't happen when two white people are competing for a job.
Does it? Like,
And not the same way.
well, not the same way. I definitely wouldn't disagree with that. I definitely wouldn't disagree with that. I think racism is obviously a real thing, without a doubt. Bigotry is a real thing. But I wonder at the root if it's more of a human nature thing, where it's just we've evolved to a place where we can see differences in skin color and we say, okay, that's an easy way for us to be tribal and to separate ourselves out. But I just had this conversation the other day with my wife, because as you might imagine, I talk about this stuff a lot. And she was making a comment of like, racism is just so stupid. It's just such a stupid thing. And obviously it is in so many ways. But in some ways, I said to her, like, because I think we need to understand things like, well, but we have a son. Do you love our son? Yeah. Do you love our son more than you love another random kid that you don't know? And her visceral reaction, she kind of knew it was a trick question, but was like, well, yeah, he's our son. And I guess my question is, if that essence of that idea of like, well, that's mine, and therefore there's a different type of love for that, if you don't extrapolate that out and you get racism, you get bigotry, because at our core, we can't help. So even two white people, sure, it's not racism, but there's still this sense of like, well, I want to be better off than that person. That inherent drive leads to the problems we have today. What do you think?
I agree with that. But this is a capitalist society.
Right.
I do support our system of government and economics,
Mhm.
And I think it makes us better. I think the is the word strive, the strive to be better.
Yeah.
Is an important human character.
And it's net positive from what you said.
Lifting ourselves up and dragging others along the way is a good thing. I mean, think about it. If I become a solid citizen, a successful businessman, and I hire 1,000 people, then I've lifted 1,000 people along with me on my journey.
Yeah,
So
but what'd you do to get there?
That's a good thing.
But I guess the question becomes what you did to get there.
Did I step over somebody?
And maybe not even deliberately, right? Maybe not like intentionally, maliciously, hurting people, but we're talking about it. Let's call it out. You're a white man. I understand Jewish, obviously, but as a white man, somebody could even say in that there's something inherent in that where you are pushing some people down. That's just the nature of white privilege, as some would say. And I think there's some logic to that for sure. And that's kind of where I was before, where like, it's so complex and it's so nuanced. I wonder, is it just by design, if you will, the way this world is, that there's always going to be winners and losers? And that's horrible. That's a disgusting thought. I think you and I would agree with that, especially your value being social justice and fairness and the like. But is it inevitable? Is it inevitable in the design of how this thing is set up that it's just what's going to happen? There's going to be pain and suffering that we cause each other.